Thank you, everybody. So before I get started, this is really cool. Like a year ago, basically to the day, I went to my first TechTO event. And I was like, wow, everyone up there knows what they're talking about. And now that I'm up here, I can say quite confidently that we don't. And so we're just going to start there. So the title of my presentation, which I guess I feel like I'm actually uniquely positioned to talk about, is this going to hurt? And it's basically about how one needs to think about starting a startup and some of the things that you need to bear in mind as you go through the process. So first off, I'm going to teach you how you start a startup according to most people out in the universe. First off, you are brilliant and you have a clairvoyant moment where the entire universe appears to you in the form of some very clear mathematical formula that only you understand. You take that formula, you put it on glass or perhaps a mirror or something like that, at which point you have a business. And that business exhibits all of the things that businesses are supposed to do. Up and to the right growth in a very consistent fashion. It never goes downwards, and then next thing you know, you're rich. And that's apparently how it's supposed to work. But like, no, obviously that's bullshit. And so we're gonna put that away. Now, what I wanna ask before I move on is like, how many people here are involved in a startup, wanna start a startup? I know Haley just started a startup. Like hands up if you're like involved in this process. If you have an idea, anyone who has an idea at all, okay, hands up, good? Okay, you're wrong. Whatever you think you're gonna do, it's not gonna work the way you think it is. It's probably not gonna work at all, and that's okay. Because the most important thing to remember is that we are wrong constantly, and that's actually where wisdom comes from. Because startups are actually business experiments. You have a hypothesis about the world, you have an idea of how you actually want to manifest that hypothesis, and you set out to do it. But you know, most experiments in controlled settings with single variables actually fail. And so it's no surprise that 95% of startups fail because the hypothesis is wrong, or the methodology surrounding that hypothesis is also wrong. And this is where everyone in the room gets really sad, right? But you shouldn't. Because actually, the variable you have the most control over in a startup is yourself. You, your founding team, your core like staff members, your stakeholders, these are the variables that actually matter. And these are the things you can actually affect change on. And these are the things you need to invest your time and your energy and your attention in. Because what we've been led to believe historically, lots of high-achieving people here who probably wrote lots of standardized tests, is you've been led to believe that if you're wrong, you're dumb. But that's actually not the case. If you're wrong, you've given yourself the ability to iterate and given yourself the ability to adapt your models to reflect realities. Because if you don't do that, you will be part of that 95% that fail. But if you do adapt, you're giving yourself a fighting chance. Because pain is actually a healthy thing, the pain of being wrong. It's a really healthy thing. Because the discomfort of being incorrect, the dissonance that comes with being incorrect, allows you to understand where your limits are. And if you really dig into those limits, you can start to say, oh, I'm gonna be better. Oh, I've lost my slides. Because actually, the secret is that it never gets easier. The pain of being wrong on the first day of your startup versus the 100th day of your startup versus the 1000th day of your startup never actually changes. It just gets bigger and bigger and bigger. Like, you know, you think it's hard to raise your first $1 million. What if you're trying to balance a $1 billion company? Like that's a different kind of challenge and failure has a whole other set of issues to be dealt with. So what you actually have to do is get more resilient and understand that it's only gonna get tougher if you keep leveling up. It's like if you're a runner, for example, it never gets easy, you just go faster, right? If you're playing a video game, the bosses get harder, whatever it might be. So seek discomfort and express vulnerability surrounding that discomfort, which is actually a really hard thing to do. Like in August of 2017 when Tread almost failed. You know, we lost some really key members of our team to like some personal issues of their own. Our business model wasn't working. Personally, I lost a couple really important people in my life who passed away. And we were in the middle of a financing. And so what did we do as an organization is we started saying, I don't know what to do, but I need to figure this out. I don't know how to improve our business model, but what do you think? Stakeholder, customer, investor, whatever it might be. And we started asking really hard questions of ourselves. And what we got was honest feedback that we listened to really, really carefully. And it was that honest feedback and being able to listen to it that actually allowed us to move forward. Because what we realized is if you're wrong all the time and you have the resilience to be wrong all the time and be okay with it, that you express humility and you are able to graciously ask for help and accept it properly, because that's what makes the ultimate difference. those are the only three things that actually matter. I know I'm just about out of time. Those are the only three things that actually matter. And if you have these three things and you surround yourself with people who have these three things, it's going to be okay. Even if your startup doesn't make $1 billion, it's going to be okay because the next one will. So these are the traits that you need. And everyone in this room, because you're part of this like amazing TechTO community that should probably give itself an applause right now, has these traits. So embody these and try and be vulnerable. Because ultimately, like, I'm going to leave you with the one thing that really matters here, is that, you know, sucking at something is the first step to being really, like, being sort of okay at it, which is all we can really all hope to be. So I know I haven't said anything about my company. We are hiring if you want to talk to me. But thank you for your attention and for your interest today. And thank you all for being part of this wonderful community. Thank you.
Two questions. Ask wisely.
And sorry for going over to whoever might have had the third question.
It's just a question about your first startup. What was the moment in the startup where you really feel that it gained momentum and you feel like really succeeding at it? Thanks.
I would say this is the first one that ever has actually done anything interesting, to be fully transparent. And I didn't realize it until the people around us started saying it was doing that. And who's to say whether it will, we obviously have a very long way to go. But I think when there are ways to establish like product market fit, but I think there's sort of almost like a feeling you get when people pay a little bit closer attention to what's going on, when you get to hold people's interest for a little bit longer. You get emails from Alex that says like, come talk at TechTO. Things like that start to happen. But honestly, I think there are like a bunch. The most important thing to figure out when it's working, aside from knowing like your team is really dialed in, has to do with product and how customers or clients are interacting with your product. And there's like a whole bunch of different criteria that you can use to establish that. But I think it's like, you really understand your segments and your channels and the relationships and the value that you're bringing to people. And once you see that going, it's just iteration after that.
Last question. Where's it coming from?
How did you make the first step of from having the product to having the first customer?
Oh, that was very hard. That was very, very hard. So just for anyone who doesn't know, I mean, I suspect very few people know about Tread because like construction tech isn't exactly the sexiest thing in the entire world. We manage heavy equipment on construction sites. And so like that's like you don't just like launch that in the Twitterverse and expect people to really pick it up, And so honestly, our first customer was based around a business model that doesn't even exist anymore. Like we had to like iterate it a few different times. So I would say that today, like where our model is now and the one that's working and the one that's growing, the way we got that customer was by satisfying like their clients and their clients' clients and their clients' clients under a bunch of previous things. And then that allowed us to understand what problem we were even trying to solve in the first place. And then we just became like intense about like client service and like understanding what was wrong, how to help people, over-investing time in them to the point that they're like, dude, enough, like we don't like you that much. And that was sort of how it worked, was just like being obsessive about what people actually wanted and like checking our biases as much as we could.